welcome in Mike DeCourcy from the Big Ten Network, as well as the Sporting News. I met Raphael. I got to meet Raphael at the Purdue game the other day, and I was so happy because I just happened to look at, oh my God, Raphael. I'm like, damn. And super, super nice guy.
Yes.
And people, he's a Purdue guy, by the way, if you don't know, but super nice guy. And I told him that I really enjoy catching you and Raphael each Sunday night. And if you're not doing that, people, you're not doing yourselves a favor on the Big Ten Network, Big Ten and Beyond each Sunday night, wrapping up everything that's happened over the weekend, where everything is and where it's going. Mike and Raphael and Rick Pizzo do a great job, and it's an enjoyable start to. It's how I start my week, man. If I don't have that, I feel a little lost. I really I hate that I didn't jump on that train at the very beginning, Mike. I was not into good scheduling, but once I got into it, I'm like, bam. And then I got it recorded now anyway. So, but great stuff every Sunday night. You guys do a great job of getting things wrapped up because there's so much to wrap up when it comes to Sunday night, man, because it's all happened by then.
Yeah, it's hard to get it all in for sure. With the men's games, so we usually have quite a few on Sundays. Big Ten plays a lot of Sunday games. We got that. We've got the week ahead. We have multiple segments on the week ahead, and then of course whatever national topics. So it's been a show we've been working on since 2010-11 season. We've done the show with the exception of the 2021 season when we didn't do the program that year. So we've been running continuously 12 seasons, and it's a lot of fun to do. And I've been really proud to be a part of it for as long as I have.
And the Big Ten has kept you pretty busy because we've still got 2 games left, and you've got, I think, 8 teams within a game and a half trying to fight for one of those 3, basically one of the 3 double buys that are remaining, assuming Purdue wins one of their last 2 games and locks up the top spot. I mean, I don't remember this many teams being that competitive for that double bye this late in the season. I mean, it's been unique where every single game, every single night has meant something to somebody. I mean, it's been incredibly fun to watch the past couple months.
Well, you go all the way down to 14th place. And Wisconsin, Nebraska, Penn State are more or less tied for 14th, and tiebreakers, whatever it's possible to discern right now. But those 4 teams, I guess they're tied for 11th place or 12th place. But those 4 teams take you down to 14th in the standing, and they are 8-10 in the league. That tells you how deep the strength of this league goes. It's not overwhelming, and people are out there now just waiting for the league to not do well in the NCAA tournament, say, oh, see, they weren't any good. But the reality is that this league doesn't have a lot of great teams. It maybe has 2 if things break right. But it doesn't have a lot. And most of the teams that enter the NCAA tournament from this conference will be seeded to lose before the first weekend's over. They'll be seeded to lose one of the first 2 games, if not both of the first 2 games. So if they don't do well, it's because they weren't supposed to do well, but they're earning these spots. They earned them by winning in November, December, and by continuing to perform at a high level in the league. You know, it's funny because the ACC is all wound up now because all this is breaking against them. And they want to believe that it's unfair. Well, Ohio State, which is now in 13th place in the league, Ohio State's now in 13th. I'm sorry, I was doing the math wrong. Those teams aren't tied for 14th; they're tied for 12th. I was doing the math on a 16-team league. Yeah. We're not there yet. We're getting there. But I apologize for those errors. But the 13th place now, Ohio State had a lead on Carolina and gave it up on a late hook shot by Pete Nance that tied the game, and they lost in overtime. And that's the next to worst team in the Big Ten. And you could go all through and see examples of that. The Big Ten doesn't have many and hardly any easy nights. The ACC, oh, wow. We got Florida State coming in. Oh, we got Georgia Tech coming in. Oh, we got Louisville coming in. And that sounds great, but it isn't much when you get it on the floor. And it makes a difference. I mean, you are what your league is because that's who you're playing all the time. And there's a feeling in the ACC that is expressed by not just by fans, but by coaches that too much emphasis is put on November and December. And it should be on now. Okay, well, like, how do we know what now means if you're bad in November and December? You go out and you win 66% of your games out of conference when you have the scheduling power of the ACC. I mean, you can buy whatever games are available when you're in the ACC, and yet they still didn't win. Did they beat the Big Ten in the ACC Big Ten Challenge? They did 8-6. Not an overwhelming advantage. And then they went out and they won like 66% of their other non-conference games, while the Big Ten was winning like 77%. You win or lose. It's not anybody's fault but your own that you have bad teams in your league. And so that's how it breaks. If you're in the Big Ten, you don't have many of those. If you're in the Big 12, you don't have any of those at all. Zero. The worst team in the Big 12 beat the best team in the country by the virtue of the committee's bracket reveal, Alabama, by 24 points. Oklahoma, Alabama. Oklahoma wins by 24 points, and the game was never that close until the end. That's how strong the Big 12 has been this season.
Yeah, I was looking at the net rankings for conferences, and the ACC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. They're 7th behind the Pac-12, behind the Mountain West, behind the Big East, behind the SEC. And that's not normal. We're not used to seeing the ACC down there. As a matter of fact, I don't recall the ACC being bad as a basketball conference. I would have to go back to maybe when I was a kid. But I think this is going to be an incredible tournament. I don't care. I love the teams from the Big 12. I say, let them all in, man. I was telling Dustin the difference between a game and say the ACC and the Big 12. Buddy, you better bring a gun and knife fight and everything else in the Big 12 every night. And there's some off nights in the ACC where that's just not the case. And buddy, the Big 12 is just a bloodied, battered league. I don't know if that's going to help them or hurt them come the tournament because they're so battle tested. Are they battle weary?
See, my theory and the statistics underscore what I believe, which is that you're more likely to be battle weary. If you look back at the leagues that have gotten 9 or more teams into the field, they generally underperform. They win about 55% of their games or something like that. Well, battle tested, shouldn't you do better than that? There aren't very many teams making the Sweet 16s out of those leagues or Elite Eights or the Final Fours. We have had 2 champions out of such leagues. But think about it. In 2011, the Big East got 11 out of their 16 teams into the field. They got 11 out of 16, and only 2 of those 11 made it to the Sweet 16. Only 2. And in those games, they each played another Big East member because there was no way to avoid it. And so it was UConn beat Cincinnati second round, and Marquette beat Syracuse second round. So they both advanced. Everybody else, 9 of the 11 went home. We saw it in the Big Ten 2021, the disappointment of that. We saw it last year with the disappointment of that. Whereas in 2018, when the Big Ten, I think, got 4, I think it was 4 in 2018. Michigan goes all the way to the title game. So I don't believe it battle tested for the most part. I think it wears you down. And that may happen with the Big Ten this year in the tournament. It may happen with the Big 12. We'll see. But I think that bringing up the Big 12 is a nice little door, a nice little opening so that we can discuss Dustin's concept of no team that isn't 500 in their conference should get into the field. And I think this is a favorite topic of mine. I'm not 1,000% sure that I was the first person who said that, but it's not a bad bet. I first wrote a column about that in 1988, I believe it was 1987 or 88. I wrote that no team should get into the tournament without a 500 record. And at that point in my career, I was covering Duquesne, which was in the Atlantic 10, a very good season for the Atlantic 10. Tommy Garrick and Silk Owens were at Rhode Island. They end up making the Elite 8 or Sweet 16 that year. West Virginia was good. It was a really good league. And so I wrote that column. And then a year later, I got a promotion to cover Pitt in the Big East. And so then you're on the road at Syracuse and Providence and Georgetown and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, and after I'd done pretty much the whole circuit of the road games, I thought back and I was like, man, that was wrong. There was such a difference. The Big East that, Alonzo Mourning and Derek Coleman and Billy Owens. And it just wasn't, they weren't the same.
And it's changed even more, I think.
What's that?
And I think it's changed even more to what you're talking about.
Yeah, it has. It really has, because the Atlantic 10 doesn't have very many Tom Garrick, Silk Owens backcourts now. They're not bad, but they're not great. They're probably only going to get one team in the league. And this is true not just for the Atlantic 10 Big East comparison, but pretty much everybody below the Power 5 level, Power 6 level, because you have to include the Big East. It's a big difference. Because I've seen it now for 35 years of covering. There are differences in the leagues. And so if you can create all leagues being equal, then yeah, it makes sense that no one who has a losing record should make it. But because they're not, I mean, there are those jarring differences. And there's a difference now between, as I said before, the Big 10, Big 12, where there's so few places to hide, and a league like the ACC, which is lugging around Notre Dame and Georgia Tech and Louisville having one of the worst major college seasons at least in the expanded bracket era. They are flirting with the worst ever. I think beating Clemson at home might have pulled them out of that ignominy, but it's still a terrible season. And so I think that we're seeing those differences, and that's why the idea that you have to be 500 doesn't hold up. Because the leagues are so different. You're in the Big 12, and if you were in a different league, if you were in the Mountain West, you'd be like, 14-2 or something, or 13-5 or whatever it is, and you're in the Big 12 and you're like 7-11 and like happy that you're that good.
Right. I guess, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate this point as well as it is in my brain. So,
before you even attempt it, you're wrong.
I understand that. I guess so. These are the points that I'd like to counter with, and I'm not here to make an argument. What I'm saying is, for me, the Power 5 leagues have ample opportunity to get teams into the NCAA tournament. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, whether it's through non-conference scheduling, whether it's through winning your regular season, winning the conference tournament. And you go down to the mid-major level, and it's basically, unless you have maybe one or two losses or win your conference tournament, that's your only chance to get in. So to me, I understand that there's a different level. Let's use Wisconsin, Nebraska. They would dominate probably the A-Sun or the Horizon League or another league. But you might have, I'm going to use Kennesaw State as an example. They just won the A-Sun, had a phenomenal year. If they lose one game in the A-Sun tournament, they're out. They're done. I would prefer to see a team that wins their league and a conference tournament champion from those mid-major leagues, as opposed to a team that finishes below the 500 mark. And I'm not here to disagree. Again, if Wisconsin is in those leagues, they're probably undefeated and they win, and there's no comparison there. I just feel like when you are below 500, it's rewarding mediocrity for a chance to win a national championship.
Well, I mean, I think first of all, you have to remember that the teams that we're talking about all had better have significant out of conference achievement in order to be considered. And let's use West Virginia as an example. West Virginia played Pitt. I'm not remembering whether it was a home game or a road game. I think I can find that out in a second.
They played at Pitt.
They played at Pitt. Okay, so they play at Pitt. Pitt's now leading the ACC. If Pitt wins against Notre Dame tonight or tomorrow, if they beat Notre Dame, they clinch a share of the ACC championship. West Virginia went in there, won by 30. And that's the league champion. Or prospective league champion. So that's you have to do those things or you're not in this discussion. So I don't think it's fair to describe it as mediocrity. I think your league has to be extraordinary for you to have a sub 500 record in that league and still be considered. And then that's another element. And then I think that what's overlooked, Dustin, is that with the way the NCAA tournament is set up with 32 automatic bids, and then you take out, let's say, the 10 leagues that are likely or possible to have more than one bid in a given year. We'll include the Atlantic 10, even though this year they don't have any chance. So that leaves 22 bids into the tournament out of 68 teams. So 22 teams divided by 68. Wait, where is that? 22 divided by 68 is 32.3%, 32.4%. So that's 1/3 of the field, okay? 1/3 of the NCAA tournament field goes to those leagues that you're describing. And they don't have 1/3 of the best teams. Let's be honest. They don't.
Right.
So they're already getting granted this special thing, this opportunity to play for the championship. So I don't think they're getting a raw deal generally. I think where they get a tough deal is somebody like College of Charleston. I have demonstrated over the years that if you dominate a league in the way that College of Charleston is, if you're winning way more than 80% of your regular season games, you have a terrific chance of doing well in the NCAA tournament. Those teams do well. It usually takes an exceptional team that's won 80% of its games in a higher league that to take them out of the tournament. People say, "Oh, where'd that upset come from?" And then you look and they're like, "Well, they win all the time, so they know how to win."
Right.
So like if College of Charleston loses their conference tournament final, if they lose the Colonial final and they don't get in, I think that's a mistake. And I've tried to argue this with the committee to respect dominance more than they do. I think that those teams should get more consideration than they do. Florida Atlantic would be another. I don't think there are any others in this season that fall into that category, but those two do. And that's why I've consistently been seeding them higher than the other mid-majors. It's what, if you look at Lenardi does his bracket differently than I do. I don't follow, like, if you're in first place, like if you have the tiebreaker in a mid-major conference that I'm putting you in, because the reality is nobody decides their conference tournament by the regular season champ. So I can put anybody in there that I want and be accurate.
Right.
So what I do, like, okay, College of Charleston and Hofstra have the same record in conference. Hofstra has a win over College of Charleston. So they're the number one seed in the tournament. So Lenardi has them in, and then he has Charleston on his first four out as or maybe next four out, but as a contender, but not in. See, to me, I think if Hofstra goes out and beats Charleston again in the Colonial final, I think that Charleston should be in there on the basis of dominance. They were a dominant team this year. They didn't play the greatest schedule. Well, it's not easy to play the greatest schedule when you're College of Charleston. Nobody wants to play you. And I will say that the other element of this that really kind of frosts me, because I've been talking about it for 20 years almost, is that the mid-majors, here's what too many of them do. Okay. Hey, Duke, you want to play me? No. Okay. They hang up the phone. See, nobody will play us. And then they go out and schedule bad teams.
Right.
Instead of saying College of Charleston, calling VCU or VCU calling Colgate or whatever. Like those games will help you in your, because if you beat good teams that have high rankings, it'll help you. Liberty has always got good rankings.
Right.
I mean, when they have a good team, they've been a high net team for a team out of their league, the ASUN. They're like when they were good 2 years ago, they had a great net ranking. When they were good in 2019, they had a great net ranking. So why doesn't everybody call in Liberty like 5 minutes after the end of the previous season?
Right.
But these teams never play each other. That's one of the reasons why I wasn't happy about the Bracket Busters going away, because it was the one time when they literally finally agreed to play one another. They all look at it as, well, if I lose to them, then I'm eliminating myself. But you're delusional because they're not taking you anyway because you're not playing enough good teams.
Right.